Hello, my name is Mike, and my call sign is K0NGA, and I'm an amateur radio enthusiast living in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado. In this video, I want to show you the basics of programming the Connect Systems CS700, a very popular radio due to its feature set and price point in the digital DMR radio market for amateur radio enthusiasts. The first thing you need to do is to go to the Connect Systems website and pull down the software for the radio. So all you need to do is go to the Connect Systems website, click on the CS700 link at the top, and that'll take you to this page. The two things you will need here are the USB driver for the radio, which you use with the USB cable that came with the radio. You will also need the latest version of the programming software. As of this video, that is version 1.14. So you need to download both of those, install both of those. You will also need your radio, obviously, and the USB cable, but we'll save that towards the end of the video. So once you install the programming software and run it, it comes up looking like this. So we will go through the various tabs here, and I'll do my best to explain what's needed and what you need to set and what is really important and what's really not important. So the first thing to understand about this software is that it is still relatively new. It is not bug free, and as you can see, I have installed the latest version, which is version 1.14, but the software still thinks it's version 1.13. Don't let that throw you off. It will be okay. And when you first bring it up, since you haven't read from your radio yet, there's going to be a lot of generic information in here. Again, don't let that bug you. It'll pull down the information from the radio the first time you program it. It's not a problem. So where we're going to start is in the general settings, and what you see here is that as I open these up, it doesn't actually close other screens. They just kind of stack on each other. It's okay to close these. It's not going to cause any problems. It's no big deal. In the general settings screen, the most important thing that you need to change is this little setting right here. Now, in order to communicate on a DMR network with repeaters, it is best, and in a lot of cases the network providers will say required, that every radio have a unique ID. Now, the best way to make sure, at least here in Colorado, the way that we like to do it, is to get a radio ID from a network called the DMR-MARC radio network. So if you go to DMR-MARC.net, go to that network, there is a link to request an ID. You get that ID, and then you put it in here. So just for the purposes of demonstration, we'll pretend that our radio ID is 9999, and we'll put it in there. Now, the radio name above it is for cosmetic purposes only, really. This will show up when you turn on the radio. It will show up on the display. So what I recommend for this is simply to put your call sign in your name. So in that case, I will put in K0NGA and Mike, like that. Very straightforward. There's really not a whole lot on here that you really need to worry about unless you're programming this for a specific network. Again, if your radio network folks say that you should have some of this enabled, great. The only thing that I add to this is to turn on the channel-free indication tone. That is just something I like to do. Again, not required for functionality, but a kind of nice to have kind of thing. The next section is the menu items. There's a whole bunch going on here. In here, I don't use the voice activation feature, the Vox feature, so I keep that turned off. I also tend to be a bit paranoid about what people can see and do with my radio, so I disable the radio enable, the remote monitor, the radio check, those kind of things. Just because I'm overly paranoid and I don't want people messing with my radio. Some people like to leave this enabled in case their radios get stolen so they can remote brick them so they don't get used. It's really up to you. If you're going to disable these radio enable and radio disable features, you'll probably also want to go here into the digital emergency system and uncheck those boxes there as well, just to be safe. And that's really all you need to do here. And again, the menu's here. Now each one of these has a particular setting that is explained in the documentation. You can get that documentation again from the website that we were just at, the Connect Systems CS700 page, and see what each of these do. Some of them are pretty explanatory. You can enable or disable talk around for the entire radio. You can turn off the backlight. You can turn off the intro screen, although I don't think that particular setting works yet, because it didn't in mine. You can enable and disable the ability to change the squelch, those kind of things. Again, not things that you really need to worry about for functionality, but nice to know. Something that you will want to spend some time pondering and thinking about for the functionality radio is what the buttons do. And in this radio, you have to tell the radio what you want each of the buttons to do. There are 3 programmable buttons on the radio. There is a top button, which is orange, that is up by the antenna. And there are 2 side buttons, side button 1 and 2, that are underneath the push to talk button on the left side of the radio. All you have to do is pull down the menu and see what you can do with these buttons, and then just decide what you want to do what. What I have on my radio, just to let people know, is I have on top, I have the talk around on the top button. On the side button I have the scan off and on, and on the second side button I have high power, low power. Let me see if I can find that here. Oh yeah, I was highlighting it already. No wonder I couldn't see it. And then this is a short press. So if you just press and release it real quick, that's what this does. You can also have a long press, and the duration of that long press is set here. So 1000 milliseconds is 1 second. So you have to hold it for 1 second, and it'll enable these features based on what you assign it to. So I have the monitor on the same button as the scan off and on. And again, it really doesn't really matter too much. If you want to be able to control the squelch, to go from normal to tight squelch, put that maybe on the side button 2 long press, and the top button long press. Maybe you turn your alert tones on and off so you can be kind of in stealth mode. Again, completely up to you, but the buttons won't do anything unless you assign a feature to them. So be sure to do that. Text messaging, there's not a whole lot of text messaging that is enabled on most DMR networks in amateur radio, at least around here, so this is not something you have to worry about yet, but know that it's there. And again, privacy settings. Privacy settings have more to do with encryption, and from what I understand of amateur radio, it is not allowable to encrypt your communications in amateur radio because that is not allowed by FCC rules for amateur radio. Your transmissions must be readable by other people publicly, so this you can safely ignore. So now that we've got the settings of the radio, the basic settings, the way that we like, we need to actually start trying to put some channels in here. Now, if you've studied or know anything about DMR networks and turbo networks, as they're sometimes called, referring to the Motorola MotoTRBO implementation of DMR, which is a very, very popular in amateur radio these days. The DMR-MARC network uses a lot of MotoTRBO. Here locally, the Rocky Mountain Ham Radio Turbo network uses MotoTRBO equipment. You have to have certain information before you can program a channel. You have to know the repeater color code, you have to know the talk groups, and you have to know which repeater slot, 1 or 2, that talk group is on. So to get started, what we're going to do here is that we're going to program some example frequencies. We'll do a digital repeater frequency, we'll do a digital simplex frequency, and then we'll do some analog as well, because this radio can do both digital and analog, so that's really cool. So in digital, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our contact list, and we have to do this because we have to do our talk groups, and talk groups are also called a group call. So in order to do this, I thought it would be good to demonstrate the DMR-MARC network because, of course, the turbo network is Colorado only. The Rocky Mountain Ham Radio is Colorado only, but DMR-MARC is worldwide. So I thought this would make a great example. So the way that you do this is you have to know the repeater IDs, the talk group IDs, and the talk group numbers in order to make this work. Now the DMR-MARC makes this kind of simple because they use 1, 2, and 3 as their very common talk group numbers, which is great. They also have some regional ones, and I'll also demonstrate this here. So the first talk group that we're going to program is the DMR-MARC Worldwide Talk Group, and that is on call ID 1. And it just so happens when you add talk group or contact list settings in here, it automatically decrements starting from 1, which is great, or increments, as you say. So really what you need to do is change the contact name so that you know what we're dealing with. So in this case, I'm just going to call this DMR Worldwide. Just like that. It is a group call, and it's a call ID 1. You can give it a you can turn the receive tone on, yes or no, if you want to. Again, it's optional. I like to have them on because I like my radio to beep. Call me weird. So the next talk group is call ID 2. Call ID 2 is a DMR local. So every DMR repeater that follows the DMR programming scheme will have a worldwide, a local, and in the case of the United States, a North America talk group. The worldwide and North America talk groups are linked to other repeaters, but the local is local only to that repeater, and it is on talk group 2. Now, the next one for North America is DMR North America, and this is where we run into our first kind of issue, in that the display name can only be 16 characters. So how you deal with this is up to you. I'll just take out the space. I'll get the whole thing in there. That's all good. I'll turn on the receive tones for these as well. Now in Colorado, we are part of the Mountain Regional Talk Group area in DMR. So we're going to put that in. So it's DMR Mountain. We can call it Mountain Region, but that's too many characters. Now this one, they actually use different call ID numbers. So the Mountain Talk Group is 3177. Just like that. So now that we've got our digital talk groups in there. Now there's one talk group also that you want to add in just to have because it's used very often, and of course we are most likely going to use that in Simplex, and that is the all call. So we actually will call this all call because we don't like to be weird about it. There is a special call group for that. It's the all call group, and you'll notice when I click out of that it is assigned a number automatically. That is actually the maximum number that you can put in. If you're really geeky, you'll know that is 16-bit with all ones. That means that any time that goes out, if the repeater is programmed to let it through, that everyone that is on that talk slot will receive that. It's the easiest way also to set up a kind of an open simplex frequency so everybody can talk to everybody on that simplex frequency, which is why that's used that way. And that is really all we need to get the radio functional. Now, back to that radio ID idea. Okay? So again, let's pretend that this is somebody else's radio and they want to see my call sign on their display when I transmit. You can set up private contacts here. So I'm going to put in my call sign, K0NGA, and my name, Mike. This is the way I like to do it, call sign and name. And you set up a private call. Now, on some networks, this private call allows you to talk directly to other people's radios, which is cool. Check with your repeater network folks to see if that's allowable on their network, just to be safe. Some people don't want you tying up a repeater slot to talk to an individual for hours on end. Again, protocol and those kind of things. Etiquette comes into play here. Now in here, I'd put in the radio ID that that person has for the radio. So in this case, again, 9999, just as an example. A great place to get some of these IDs is just to go to the DMR-MARC database, which has a link from the DMR-MARC site. Then you can pull down all the radio IDs to your heart's content. Now there are several thousand radio IDs listed in the DMR-MARC network. As of right now, I believe the CS700 is limited to only 1,000 contacts. So you may want to be selective with who you put in there. I have all the Colorado DMR-MARC, and I also have all the Wyoming DMR-MARC because we have a lot of folks that get on our network from Wyoming. So I have all those in there and try to keep that up as up to date as possible. So what this does, that when the radio receives a transmission on digital through DMR, it will display the radio name of the radio that's talking. If that radio ID, or the radio number, the radio ID here, is in your contact list, instead of showing the radio ID, it'll show the contact name. Very, very convenient. Okay, so now that we have our contacts in, we need to set up our receive groups. Again, this is a DMR concept. It's a little weird, but you do what you have to do. In order to receive, you have to tell each channel what talk groups should be received on that talk group. And there's several different ways to do this, but generally the best way to do this is just to set it up on a one-to-one basis. That's usually the best way that it works for amateur radio. So we're just going to name our groups according to the talk groups that we programmed in, just to be consistent. So in this case, we already have one group list set up because it has one in it. It defaults to the first group, which is fine. So we'll just go ahead and name that. We're going to add a new one, and we're going to call that DMR Local. We'll put the local talk group in there, and this will make more sense once we start programming actual channels. We're going to do DMR North America, and of course DMR Mountain as well. Well, I need to add one for that. DMR Mountain, and we'll add the Mountain talk group. And let's double check these. We can go back and forth with these buttons here. Worldwide, local, North America, Mountain. Great. Now, just because I like to be consistent and I like things to make sense and I like to make sure that I don't miss things, I'm actually going to add one for all call. Now, for all call, what you do is you actually leave the list empty. Okay. The reason why is that, and again, I haven't tested this, but again, this is me being paranoid and just being extra careful. If you put all of these talk groups in, then the only things that will come back to you are these four, and you don't want that to happen. You want anything to come back to open your channel and for you to listen. This is how I have it programmed in my radio, and it does work. So that's cool. So now that we have our talk group set up, we have our receive group set up, so now we can actually start programming a channel. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to set up, again, we're going to set up a digital simplex, and we're going to set up a digital repeater network as well. And what we're going to do, again, we're going to do the DMR network. Now, the first thing you're going to do when you program a channel is that you need to determine whether that channel is analog or digital. Okay. Now, if you're programming an analog channel in ham radio terms, most ham radio frequencies are still 25 kilohertz. It's not the case with commercial radios. Commercial radios are now mandated to be 12.5 kilohertz in the United States by the FCC, but doesn't affect amateur radio, thank goodness. So if you're on analog, chances are that you're going to be programming a 25 kilohertz channel. You need to change that on every channel. Now with digital, all digital is 12.5 kilohertz. So you don't really have to worry about much about it. Just have to make sure that the channel mode is digital. Then you notice when we switch from analog to digital, in analog you have this analog data section at the bottom, and the digital data section is grayed out. When you switch to digital, the analog data grays out, and we now have the digital data section available. So the first thing we're going to put in now that we've selected digital is the channel name. In this case, this repeater is on a little mountain we call Lee Hill here in Colorado. So we will simply state that that this channel is on Lee Hill. It's a DMR-MARC repeater, and we're actually going to start out by programming the worldwide talk group. So we'll simply call this Lee DMR worldwide. Okay, very straightforward. And you'll see, again, we'll see here in a minute why we have to do one channel per talk group. The next thing to put in is, of course, the frequency pair. Our repeater that we're programming in here transmits out on a frequency of 445.05, and so that's the one we're going to receive on. And most of the time when you're talking about UHF, there is a 5 kilohertz difference. In this case, it's true, so we're going to transmit out on 440.05, which then the repeater will receive. So that is our frequency pair. The next thing we want to look at is, and this, for my case, is the MNIC criteria. Now, this is not required, but it's something that a lot of hams around here like to do. The emit criteria will prevent you from transmitting and will give you an error tone in certain conditions. So in this case, for digital, we use color code. So if the radio is receiving the color code on a frequency that's transmitting and your radio is receiving it, it won't let you transmit out. You'll hit the push to talk button if something's coming in. The radio will beep at you and it won't transmit. This is to keep you from doubling, and it keeps you from doubling unknowingly, which is kind of cool. The other thing that we like to enable here is the talk around. You actually, if you want to use talk around, you have to enable it on a per channel basis. So be sure to do that. Some of these other features really don't change very much. The auto scan, which is a scan feature, which we'll talk about later in the video. You can set something as receive only, which will again completely prevent you from transmitting. This is nice if you want to monitor a channel but don't want to accidentally transmit on it. Lone worker is a commercial feature to ensure that you have the workers that don't get out of contact, and of course voice activation, which I don't use. Similar over here in the digital data, there's a few things up here that we don't use. Private call, again, check with your repeater network to see if that's allowed. The emergency acknowledgments and the data call confirm, not something we typically use, or the emergency system. What is required, though, is the next set. Now, the contact name is the talk group that you want to transmit to. In this case, we're doing DMR Worldwide, so we will choose that from the drop-down menu. The group list is the receive list, where we want to receive on this channel. So again, we'll set that as well. A one-to-one relationship reduces confusion, which is great. You'll need to set the color code. In this case, it just so happens that most of the repeaters on DMR are used color code 1. This particular repeater is no exception, so we leave that as color code 1, but that needs to be set correctly. We don't use the privacy, which is more about encryption. We don't use that, so we ignore it. We set it to none. And then the repeater slot. On the DMR network, the worldwide talk group is on repeater slot 1. This channel is now programmed. Okay, so now what if I want to talk on North America? Okay, we need to add another channel then. We just click Add, scroll back up, and we go again. Digital. Again, we're on Lee Hill, so we want to do Lee DMR, in this case North America. Same frequency pair, as is great for the DMR radios. This is why we love DMR. So our frequency was 445.05 with a transmit offset 440.05. We set our admit criteria to color code. We enable talk around. And this time we're going to choose the DMR North America talk group as our send and receive. Leave our color code to 1, which is correct. And in this case, North America is on repeater slot 1 along with North America. So that means that if you have a repeater that's on both of these and someone's talking on the North America talk group, no one else can talk on the worldwide talk group. That's just the way that works. Okay, so now we will need to program local. So we will do a new channel. Digital. Lee DMR, and we'll do local. Same frequency pair, 445.05, 440.05. Set our admit criteria, talk around, and this time we will choose DMR local as our send and receive. Color code 1 again, and this time the local is actually on the other repeater slot. So you can have somebody talking on local and worldwide at the same time, or have somebody talking on local and North America at the same time, which is great. Now there's one more for this particular repeater, since this is in Colorado. We are in the regional talk group of Mountain. So we'll do Lee Hill DMR Mountain. We'll just abbreviate that. Same frequency, 445.05, 440.05. Do our admit criteria again, talk around. Oh, almost forgot. Gotta do digital. Notice it was grayed out until I did that. It's a great way to remind you. Now again, contact name, we'll do Mountain. Group list is Mountain. Color code is 1. And Mountain shares the repeater slot 2 with local. So again, nobody can be talking on Mountain if somebody's talking on local, and vice versa. So now that is the digital repeater setup. We've got all 4 of our channels in now, and we're ready to go with those. Now, let's do a digital simplex frequency. So we'll add a new channel here, and we will do a simple call, simple simplex type of channel. So again, we need to do digital. We'll just call this Simplex. You can call it whatever you want here. You're limited only to 16 characters, so you can call it whatever you want. And we'll do a simplex frequency of 446. Very simple. Now in this case, the emit criteria is not as important because depending on how you use it, it may or may not be very active. So in my case, when I program these, I always leave simplex frequencies as always. Now it would be kind of silly to allow talk around on these channels because there's only one frequency. There's not a separate frequency pair. So allowing talk around on simplex frequencies is not required. It's just not. Over here, this is where it gets interesting. More often than not, when you're doing a simplex frequency, you're going to be on repeater slot 1. That's just generally how it goes. That's what I recommend starting with. You can experiment with that, but start with repeater slot 1. And you need to set your contact and group list to all call. There's really not a need to use talk groups, and there's really a lot of debate on whether that's really necessary or not, or feasible. But as a general open simplex frequency, you just set the send and receive to all call. So it's just basically an open simplex frequency. Simple as that. Okay, now we've got our digital channels in. What we want to do next is try this out on analog, which would be a good thing to have. Now, I'm going to add another channel. It's very, very similar, with some analog concepts built in. So first we'll start with a repeater. So we're going to start with a Rocky Mountain hand repeater, just as an example. So we leave this to analog, but again, remember, most amateur radio frequencies on analog are 25 kilohertz, and this repeater is no exception. Now this is a Rocky Mountain ham radio repeater, and we're going to do the one on lookout, let's say. So I can do that. The frequency for this particular repeater is 449.625, 5 megahertz offset, as always. And on analog repeaters, you can use a channel-free admit criteria or leave that open. Again, up to you. And you can enable talk around. Okay. Now we come down to something that should look familiar to most hams that use analog repeaters, and that is the PL tone or CTCSS or DCS tones. Okay. For this particular repeater, we have an encode and decode tone of 141.3. So we will come down here and choose 141.3 and 141.3. That's all you really need to do. If you scroll down a little further, you get the digital tones for narrow and for wideband, just like that. Very straightforward. Okay, so let's double check that. Analog, name, frequency pair, channel talk around, 25 kilohertz bandwidth. Excellent. Let's try now a simplex frequency. Again, an open simplex frequency. So we'll put this on analog. Again, 25 kilohertz. We'll call this simplex A for analog, or we can just help out analog. Like that. And I will use the same frequency as before, 446. So this will be analog instead of digital, 446. Again, I really don't enable admit criteria for simplex, and of course talk around does not really apply. And we're not going to use any tones on this particular simplex frequency. We'll just leave it wide open. And there are our channels. Fantastic. Now, we have the channels in. How do we use them? So on this radio, it's very, very similar to a MotoTRBO radio if you've programmed a MotoTRBO radio before. If not, there's a concept called a zone. And a zone is simply a collection of channels. And on your radio, you have a channel selection knob at the top. And this process will essentially assign one channel to each one of those slots. We're going to call this common. We'll call it the common zone. Now you can set up collections of channels, as many, almost as many as you want. I don't know if there's a limit. I haven't run into one yet. So you can collect these and put them into different zones, and you can switch between the zones to have different channels available for you to switch between with the knob. In this case, we have less than 16 channels. 16 channels per zone is the limit. So we're just going to put all the channels in the zone. It's very, very simple. Now, when you turn on the radio for the first time after you program it, it'll default to the first channel. It'll default to the first zone that you program in the software. After that, if you change zones and you turn the radio off, you turn it back on, it'll come back to the zone that you left it on, which is very convenient. So now that we have our channels in a zone, we are pretty much ready to go. Now, one last thing. Let's talk about scanning. Now, again, if you've programmed a Motorola commercial radio, this makes sense to you. I have never before, and this kind of threw me off. So the scan list is like a zone, but this is a list of channels that you want to scan. Now in this case, I just want to scan everything. Let's make it simple. I want to scan everything. So we'll put this in as common scan. We'll just call it that. And of course the scan list is here. And you can add different scan groups by clicking add and doing another scan group. Now you have these settings down here. The ones that really matter, the one that matters most is this one here, the transmit designated channel, the last active channel. So what that means is that if you're scanning and you go to, and if something comes up, a channel comes up, when you hit the push the talk button while scan is active, it'll transmit out on the channel that was last active. So the channel that you received last is the channel that it'll automatically transmit on, which is a very, very nice feature. You can also set up a priority channel, 1 and 2. Whatever the priority channels you select, the radio will spend a good portion of its time listening to that channel and deprioritize the other channels. So if you want to scan several channels, but you want one channel to be listened on most, like if you're in an emergency situation and you want absolutely one channel to be the one that you want to listen to most, so you don't miss anything, you would set that as a priority channel. In most cases, if you don't care, you just leave that to none, which is what we'll do here. Okay, so now that's our scan list. Now the way that the scan list works, in order to use a scan list, you have to assign a scan list to a channel. Okay? So what you need to do is go back to your channels, and right here, here's our scan list, and it'll come up with the names that we've programmed. Now if I set this channel to that scan list, what that means is, if my program is sitting on that channel, if my radio is set to that channel, that's the channel that's up on the screen and I don't have scan enabled, if I hit the scan on off button, this is the scan list that'll get scanned. What this means is that you can actually go to these different channels, go to the next channel, and I can have a different scan list set up to this channel if I wanted to. So if I go to this channel and hit scan, I can scan a certain number of channels. I go to the next channel. If it's set up to a different scan group, it'll scan a different set of channels. Now you can make this as simple or as complicated as you want. For amateur radio use and to keep things from getting confusing, the best way to keep from getting confused is to only assign a channel to one zone. Don't assign a channel to the different zones. It gets kind of confusing. And then for each zone, create a scan group of all of those channels in the zone, and then assign that scan group to every channel in the zone. This just makes it easy and uncomplicated and unconfusing. So in this case, I can be on any channel in the zone, and it will scan all the channels in that zone. Now, if you want to, you can make this as complicated and as tricky as you want, as long as you remember how things are set. That's all that matters. This is basically a setup that we use. This is now ready to go, ready to program. Okay? Now, in order to get this into your radio, again, you must have the USB driver installed. You download that USB driver, you extract it. There is an installer there for both 32-bit and 64-bit. Use the installer that is appropriate to your operating system. If you have a 64-bit Windows, you need to use the 64-bit driver. If you don't know, call your manufacturer or somebody that can help you to determine if your operating system is 64-bit or 32-bit. What you do then is that you plug in the USB cable that came with your radio into the USB port in your computer. You plug the other end of it into the speaker mic plug on the side. It only goes in one way. And then you turn your radio on. Your radio must be on for this to work. So once the radio is on, it's basically ready to be programmed. So what you do is you either go to Program Write Data, or you click on this little icon here. It's got a red arrow pointing towards the radio. Okay? So once you click that button, it'll pop up a dialog box, and when you're ready to go, you click OK. And this will push that configuration up to the radio. And this is literally how long this takes. Doesn't take very long. And if your computer has an available USB 2 slot, it may even take less. Your radio is now programmed. So you can disconnect it from your computer and you can use it. I hope you found this video helpful. For more information, you can check out the Connect Systems site for the radio and download the documentation there. There's also a lot of good information on the DMR-MARC.net website and also on the Rocky Mountain Ham Radio website at rmham.org. Have a good day, and I hope to hear you on the air.